Hello. Today's guest is a lawyer, educator, photographer, storyteller, traveler, and entrepreneur. Her journey has taken her from photographing professional surfers while swimming in some of the world's most epic waves to receiving a Juris Doctorate from Rutgers Law. If she's not photographing a wedding with her husband Scott in a remote locale, managing her team of associate photographers, or providing legal counsel to creative business owners, she's probably eating an acai bowl, chasing her pup Artie around the beach, or watching SVU reruns in her bungalow, which I had to ask what those were because I apparently don't watch enough TV. Welcome to the podcast, Magi Fisher.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So Maggie and I met actually not too long ago now. It's been a couple of months in person in Phoenix at we met at the show at conference, or do we meet? Okay.
At San Diego at Hybrid Co.
Oh, it's at Hybrid. Oh yeah, even closer. I'm thinking all the way back to show it. Yeah, at Hybrid was the first time we met.
Yeah.
So I feel like in no time I just connected with Maggie. She's super sweet and friendly and super hard worker. I'm amazed at what you can get done in such a short amount of time. It's pretty mind-boggling. And what we're talking about today is your most recent project, your template shop with contracts for creatives and just law in general. We actually typically record several months, several weeks out from the time of recording is when people hear it. But I feel like right now, a lot of people are seeking legal counsel and just legal help around the coronavirus. And so when I reached out to Maggie, I was like, you know what? I think this is a good time for us to chat and hopefully help, those people who are like nervous about contracts or maybe just want to hear a lawyer talk about some issues that people are facing. So I thought it was a really good time, and I'm excited that Maggie was willing to jump on so last minute with us.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about contracts.
I know. It's your bread and butter. It'd be like somebody asking me to talk about photography. So
yeah,
we all know that contracts are important. And, like I said, right now, maybe people are revisiting contracts and wondering, is my contract good enough? So my first question for you is, I want you to dive into what it looks like to have an okay contract versus a thorough contract written or reviewed by an attorney.
Yeah. So I think that a lot of people right now are looking at their contracts more than ever. Like now is the time where, we're figuring out where we're covered, where we're not covered. And for some people, it's an unfortunate situation, but I think we can all look at it really positively and realize we're going to come out on the other side of this, really knowing our contracts, really knowing the agreements that we come into, and being able to improve them for the future. So there's a lot of different places right now where photographers and artists and creatives can get contracts. And I think it's really important to think about where you're getting your contracts from. I know some CRMs, like I use Dubsado, and there's Honeybook. Other providers like that sometimes offer these template contracts. And there's a lot of photographer shops out there that offer them. But what I've been recommending and finding is that you really want to make sure you're purchasing your templates from an attorney or a legal shop. And if you're just using a contract template that you have found online or that you might have bought from a photographer, that you're running it by your own lawyer and having it lawyer approved.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think that the consequence would be, not to be like dun, 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 about it, but like what happens if you're using a contract that doesn't satisfy, I don't know, like what you thought, or what are the potential consequences of having a not good contract?
Well, I think the biggest problem is the ambiguities and the disorganization when we start to buy contract templates from other resources that maybe aren't attorney approved. They're not going to have, at the end of the contract, usually there's a lot of, it sounds like legal jargon, like indemnification and liability and choice of venue and all of these really important foundational things that should be in a contract. And then we also run into the issue of if we're buying a contract that's not attorney approved, there might be ambiguities or repetitive within the contract that then contradicts each other within your own contract. So when you're going to interpret it, if for any reason there's some sort of client dispute or God forbid, like you had to bring it into the legal system and your contract is conflicting within itself, then you're going to have a bigger set of issues not having this really clear and well organized and unambiguous contract that needs to be interpreted.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think right now, more than anything, like we said, people have been, thinking about contracts and what do they look like because of what's surrounding the coronavirus. So right now, while we are recording this episode, it is Friday, April 17th, 2020. And we are right in the midst of the pandemic where people are homebound in the United States and very concerned for, obviously their health, but also for their financial state and for their businesses. I know, like, even with our business, we've had weddings cancel, weddings reschedule, people changing the scope of events. And so, obviously I'm referencing my contracts, but also having a lot of conversations with people around how closely are you sticking to your contract? Are you having like any flexibility in that? And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
vendors are not, and some vendors are, but at the end of the day, if somebody doesn't agree with what's in your contract after the contract has been signed, then they could potentially pursue legal action against you, if they felt like they had the ability to do so. And so, I wanted to just talk about some of the issues being faced right now and maybe what the listeners can do to better navigate this time.
Yeah. Well, I think the last thing that anybody wants to do is to have to pursue legal action or go to court, especially in the wedding industry. Like, we are here to serve our clients. A lot of us are people pleasers. We want our clients to be happy with us. Most of us have amazing reviews and testimonials from all of our clients. And our clients don't want to be in this situation either. So I think just taking that like broader perspective and seeing what we can do to mitigate getting into that situation to begin with, is a really, just thinking through how we're going to navigate this water with our clients. So I think communication is the biggest thing that we can do to try to get ahead of the situation with our clients. And one of the policies that I've been recommending for other photographers and creatives is just to look through your current contract, see what you're legally obligated to do per your contract with your client, and come up with a set of COVID-19 policies. And you can communicate them via email. You can make a hidden page on your website, something that you can distribute to your clients and let them know upfront and ahead of time what your policies are. So they have that communication and notification upfront. And you have that documentation too, that you've sent them, here's our contract, here's what we're going to do in light of these unforeseen circumstances. And I know for me personally, we have a lot of wedding clients this year and we wanted to get ahead of it. So we laid out our policies up front. We said, you're rescheduling in 2020, there's no fee. If you move to 2021, there will be a new date fee for dates in our prime season in the next year. And then 3, if you decide to just cancel or not work with our availability per our contract, all monies paid are non-refundable. And I wanted to put that information up front so that we're pushing our brides and grooms to work with us for availability. Like, I wanted them to have that notification up front, to not just go pick some random date that might work with their venue and with them, but so that they know right away that they should be working with their vendors to try to find a mutually available date. So I think trying to get in front of that with your clients and communicating with them is a really good first step to navigating all of this craziness.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. And, speaking from personal experience, I think that, writing, emailing, text messaging, they're all great for documentation. And I think if you are speaking over the phone with people, it's not a bad idea to recap a conversation and put it,
Mm-hmm.
in writing after. However, when you're on the phone with someone over an issue that's uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
I think that both parties are able to remember that you're human,
mm-hmm.
and you're a person that has feelings, and you're able to provide more empathy towards one another and more understanding.
Totally.
And, over the course of March 15th through June 6th, we've had 9 weddings that were booked previously that had to face the decision of what do we do? And I can say that the majority of them, unless they had a very clear decision and a planner, we hopped on a quick call, and like, it was a bit time consuming, from a business standpoint to have those conversations. But I can tell you without a doubt, I don't regret a single minute of it, because the relationships that you form with your clients are ultimately the crux of your business, like they're how you get referrals. And even though I'm unfortunately not going to be able to work with all of these clients any longer, due to maybe reschedules that we weren't available or cancellations or whatever, knowing that we've been able to work through something that felt reasonable together, I think will allow them to think of me and for me to think of them in like a good light, but more so for them to think of me. That's really, when you're talking about business, like, you want, as the business owner, your clients to think of you in a good light.
Yeah.
And especially around a situation that's uncomfortable and it's dealing with money, it's like, you don't want them going around and saying ill things about the business.
Totally.
And that's kind of what I've been trying to keep in mind. So I really love that you, even though you're a lawyer and you're all about papers and contracts and all those things, I love that the first tip that you gave to them was to communicate, and reach out and be proactive, with your clients. So, okay, let's talk about this. What do we do if a client is upset and they are not, like, for whatever reason, you can't meet in the middle, you can't see eye to eye, and they're threatening to potentially pursue legal action? What do you suggest?
So I would try to do everything to avoid getting to that point. I don't think for either party it's ever going to be worth it to pursue legal action. The cost of retaining an attorney and court filing costs and fees is never going to outweigh, I mean, maybe it will outweigh cost value, but time, energy, and mental health, like, I don't think it's the best use of anyone's time if it gets to that point. So I highly recommend to try to find a resolution with your client, as angry as you both may be, or as whatever kind of disagreement you might be in about keeping a retainer or not keeping a retainer or additional monies paid. You want to just try to find any way that you can meet the client in the middle, whether that's offering them a credit or a different kind of session, or maybe if they're going with a different photographer, can you make a deal with that photographer and design their album for them and provide their album for them with that difference of money that you maybe aren't willing to refund? Or, if it really comes down to it and they're asking for $1,000 back or $1,500 back or some certain amount, maybe you half it and split the difference and just say, let's just settle this. Let's just, put this behind us, because nobody wants that kind of animosity. Nobody wants to have to, pursue legal action out of this scenario. Like, we're all dealing with so much as it is. And if your clients are being completely unreasonable, like I did have somebody reach out to me in the last week who their client disputed their entire payment on PayPal and won and got a refund, including the retainer. And they had already done an engagement session and a bunch of services for their client. So it really was not fair of the client to do this to them. And per their contract, they had an arbitration clause in their agreement. So I had recommended to that client, you could file an arbitration dispute if you wanted to, but it's never the best case scenario. Like, you really want to try to resolve it with your client if you can, and try to meet them in the middle. That's like the very, very last straw that we all want to get to.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know that situation with that photographer, but I do think, like, going back to what we were talking about previously, where, you're actually speaking with people, like, over the phone and having heartfelt conversations. Like, I literally cried on the phone with one of my clients, and I felt, not because they were being mean or something like that. Like, it just, it all came to a head, and I think I was just feeling really emotional about it. And like, I think that's okay. Like, this is just such a unique time,
Yeah.
and we're all in it. It's not like, I was kind of equating it to this recently, like several years ago, I think it was like 2007 or 8. Katrina hit New Orleans, and I didn't live in New Orleans at the time, but I can imagine that people were like having to reschedule events. I mean, the city was in horrible shape for a
Yeah.
long time. And so I imagine that at that time, people were dealing with it. But right now, everyone's dealing with it, especially
Yeah.
at least in the US. Like, if you have a wedding in the US, but it's the world, it's a pandemic. Like, it's not that it's
So crazy.
I know it's not that it's one, even if certain countries are more greatly affected than others, everyone in the world knows about it. Everyone in the world understands what's going on. And so I think that's helpful, that
Yeah.
it's not like, you're living in New York, coming into the city of New Orleans post Katrina, and you're like, wait, this doesn't have anything to do with me. Like, I
Hmm.
think everyone's emotionally invested in it
Yeah.
to some extent. So,
Yeah.
oh, go ahead, Maggie. Did you want to add to that? I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's okay. Yeah, no, I think to that point too, if we come off the bat saying like, well, this isn't our contract, and we, coming out the bat with all this legal jargon, it's really gonna put our clients like in that position too, where they're like, oh, this is the direction where things are heading. And when you're on the phone, you can humanize it a lot more with your clients. And I know sometimes I've heard recently that it's really hard for people to get on the phone because they're people pleasers and it's not easy for them to stick to their policies. So I think that if you do outline your policies ahead of time and kind of think that through, what you kind of want to like keep things to with even like that client in particular, what the best case scenario is ahead of time, if you just kind of think that through or write that down, then you can kind of feel a little bit more guided with like what you're going to say to that client when you are on the phone with them. And another thing I heard recently too was that if you don't feel comfortable speaking with them on the phone because you don't want to feel pressured a certain kind of way, that you could record a video message to them instead of sending an email that just says, hey, like, I'm so sorry you're going through this. And especially if you haven't worked together with that client yet, if you haven't met in person, if you haven't had an engagement session and they don't know your heart and you're just coming out here like, I'm not refunding you, and this is what our contract says, they're going to be like, what the heck? And they don't realize that we're just trying to protect the health of our business so that we can best serve our clients. So I think if you can get, record some sort of video or just get on the phone and know what kind of policies you want to try to gear them towards, that's going to be really helpful.
Yeah. And I've heard this argument about being a people pleaser from like other business friends of mine, colleagues, like, well, Kat, like, you don't understand because, I'm a people pleaser and it's so hard for me to stick to my policies. And to that, I would say that you're actually being unfair if you're not sticking to your policies. And what I mean by that is it's a two-parter. I think number one is that when you make a policy, I would hope that you're making it in a fair, reasonable way that's protecting both you and the client. And I know that you would agree to this, Maggie, because you write contracts and you know that a contract is intended to protect both parties. So
Mm-hmm.
when two people enter into a contract, it's because both parties have a vested interest. When it comes to weddings, like, I've held up my end of the deal by holding the date, and if they want to cancel, then they don't have to be held up to the second half of that or whatever percentage of that deal. But I think ultimately, you have to be fair to both parties involved in the contract, and yourself being one of them. And I am a major people pleaser, but I'm also reasonable to myself as a person too. Like, you have to respect you as an individual and the other person and treat both parties fairly. And then the second part of that, I would say, is if you have a policy and you're actually implementing it with one person who maybe they're nice and maybe they're a people pleaser and maybe they're super understanding so they can accept whatever you say as the law and move on. But then you have a client B who gives you that pushback. I always come to a place of, I am so sorry, but in order to be fair to this person and this person and this person, I really have to do all things equal. It's not right to, treat one person one way just because of their personality and then treat another person another way. I think everyone should be treated fairly and also be treated fairly to each other, you know? And so
Mm-hmm.
I hope that helps someone who is a people pleaser, because I know it's a struggle. It's a struggle for me. Like, I have hung up the phone and cried. I have hung up the phone shaking because I know it sucks for everyone involved. It sucks for that person and it sucks for the business. Like, everyone's going through a hard time who is dealing with this. And so I just hope that helps.
That's
Helps.
definitely helpful to
Yeah.
hear.
Yeah. And I was curious too, like, obviously the podcast is called Mistakes Make Magic. So this doesn't necessarily have to be related to the coronavirus, but just like generally speaking, what are three of the mistakes that you see photographers or creatives doing when it comes to the legal side of their business?
Yeah. Great question. I'm going to keep it general so it's
That's
helpful for
fine.
everyone.
Yeah.
um, I think we kind of touched on the first one. So I was surprised how many people don't use contracts in general. And I think it's really important to use a contract, not just for the legal side of things. Like we said, it protects both parties and that's super important, but it's also a guide to the relationship and to expectations. And I like to look at it like that as well. Like I like mine to read almost like an FAQ. Like, when can I deliver? When can you expect your images to get delivered? And what can you expect that to look like? What format are they going to be delivered in? And how edited are they going to be? And all of that stuff is answered in the contract. And it's more than just this legal jargon of like, whose rights are whose. It's this guide to the relationship. And I think that's really important for establishing a healthy relationship and expectations with your client. So definitely having a contract, having it lawyer approved is super important. And the second part of that too is revising it too. I mean, I'm constantly making revisions to my contract. We're always adding new things, like, just off the cuff, a random example I can think of is, I know we all have the part about meals being included when we're, like that's something that had to get added in when we weren't getting fed and we were working for 10 hours and we were like, hey, what's going to happen to us? And then we added the part about it being a hot meal because people were just giving us like a cold sandwich that was stored in a freezer for, like we wanted to be fed the same thing as the guests. Like, we're working our butts off, and to be able to keep working like through the night, we need to be able to eat. And we want to be fed at the same time as the bride and groom so that we're not missing
Missing.
formalities that are happening. So like those are three parts to just one thing that constantly I feel like is getting revised within a contract. And yeah, it's okay to update your contract. It's okay to make revisions to it. Maybe you want to run it by an attorney and make sure that it's not conflicting anywhere and that you like properly phrased something. But I definitely think it's important to like upkeep that side of things as well with your business. And then the third one, I have a third one, is just not running your photography as a proper business. So a lot of us are artists and creatives, and whether, you're a photographer or any sort of creative entrepreneur out there, it is just as important to stick to a proper business, system and running it. So setting up an LLC, keeping your personal and business funds separated, and having business insurance. All of those like foundational business things are things that you should implement right away in your business and make sure that you're properly protecting yourselves and your clients by having these systems and, official things all in place.
Yeah. Wow. That is such great advice. And we were just talking on the call, or before we got on the call, I was asking Maggie about her template shop. So Maggie has a template shop, which I'll ask you to go in more detail about in a second, Maggie. But just to give it a little bit of an overview, it is a shop where you can go and buy legal resources. And I really wanted you guys to tune into this so that you can see Maggie, like I see Maggie, as a trusted source. I think a lot of times photographers and creatives, they don't really know like where to go for information, like, okay, maybe you need a new contract, but you're like, but I don't know where to go. And I can't afford to pay a lawyer $250 an hour to get on the phone with me, or even $250 an hour to draft a contract. Like, you're looking at hours and hours and hours for them to draft these
Yeah.
contracts for you. Or even to just review your contract. They're still going to charge you minimum $250 to review it. And then they're going to have to revise it. So then you have to pay for the clauses, or you have to pay for the extra time. So tell us a little bit about your template shop, Maggie, and how those resources can help those photographers and creators tuning in.
Yeah. Well, thank you for such a good introduction to it.
Yeah.
I definitely think templates are more worth your while than, drafting a one-on-one template with an attorney, because it is going to come out to most likely thousands of dollars to get that together. The good thing about my contracts and the templates that I put together is I feel like I've really tried to niche down into what I'm going to provide. I have my feet very firmly planted on both sides of the line as far as the legal side of things, and then being in the artist and creative world. So I have spent a lot of time making them very thorough, very particular, to cover all of the protections that we want, both for ourselves and for our clients, and for them to be really organized for our clients to read too. So they do read like that guide and kind of like an FAQ manual. And then as I continue to develop more templates and contracts, I'm working one-on-one with multiple people within that industry, so that they're super niche. We're making sure we're protecting all different kinds of scenarios for both the client and the creative. And I think it's just really important to make sure you're getting these contracts and templates that are going to best serve you and are up to date and thorough and have all the things that you possibly could need in there for your business.
Extremely thorough.
Thorough.
I told Maggie that seeing her template, because obviously, like, anything that I'm talking about on the podcast, I want to be able to like speak about with confidence, because I don't like whenever somebody tells me something and they don't know any, really and truly, they don't know anything about it. And so I did take some time to review the wedding contract that Maggie does sell in her template shop. And it is extremely thorough. In fact, I wanted to review it before we recorded. After, however, I'm going to need to spend some time taking those clauses and comparing them to what I have, because I know there's things that I'm missing, and there's things that were in the template that I didn't even think about. And so it's very, very, very thorough. And I guess my follow-up to that would be, Maggie, what if somebody has a question and they want to ask you something about the contract, or they want to, dive in a little deeper? How do you handle that? Is it like an hourly rate, or do you have like a Facebook group? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So I do have a Facebook group. If somebody has a quick question that I can answer, I'm more than happy to jump in and explain something, or hop on the phone if it's like a quick and easy answer. If it's something that's more like customization, then I do offer those one-on-one consultations, but I do my best to answer everything that I can. By just, providing those templates, and I want them to be as user-friendly as possible. And I think it's totally reasonable if somebody, has these questions about how to use it, how to implement it, those kinds of things. So
Okay,
why certain
cool.
things are important.
That's good to know. Yeah, because, sometimes, like, even with online courses and whatnot, like, you want to know that you can reach out if you have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, now if they're listening in and thinking, okay, yes, I wanted more information, where do they go for the template shop? And also, if you want to share your own handle and contact info, that would be cool too.
Yeah. Yeah. So the website is my name, MaggieFisher.com, MaggieFisher.com. Same thing for my Instagram, Magi Fisher. And yeah, I think that's where, trying to keep it as simple as possible.
I
My
like
name's
that.
difficult to spell. So
Yeah. No, it's really not. Magi is not difficult at all. Try having the last name Guidry. Okay. But no, I actually appreciate that all of your info's in one spot. I didn't even know the answer to the question about where to find it. I think, you and I have emailed and whatnot, and obviously I've been to your website, but it's interesting. And I like the fact that it's all in one place. It's really easy. People who know you, they know you're a resource. They can just go over to your website and find all the information. So that's really nice. I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and we kept our wedding Instagram and our wedding website is all Magdalena Studios, so that's all separate. Just because I feel like our wedding clients don't want to be bombarded with all of the legal contracts and templates. But yeah, I'm just keeping everything under my name, and I also have the artistlawyer.com and that trademark, so I'm using that hashtag and all. But
Cool.
yeah,
I know. I go back and forth about that. Like even just thinking for this episode, it's like, it's kind of geared towards industry professionals that if they want to tune in, they can. Oh my gosh, your pup is so cute in the background.
come say hi, buddy.
Aw. You probably saw Brad coming in and out like 4 times. I had him come get Chaos because my dog is not as quiet as your dog. Oh my God.
So fluffy.
For those of you guys who are watching the video of this on YouTube, you're seeing the adorableness that's just popped onto the screen.
He does make Instagram appearances too.
He's precious.
He's only 6 months. He's going to be huge.
Oh my God. 6 months.
Yeah.
His head is the size of my entire dog.
He's huge.
Oh my gosh. He's so cute. Well, thank you so much, Maggie. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. And
thank you.
I'm excited for the listeners to reach out to you if they want to, look into your contracts or seek legal advice.
Thank you. Yeah. And I'll send you a custom discount code for your listeners too.
Okay. Sounds good. And also, is your code Stay Home still active, or did that end today?
Yeah. The code Stay Home is still active for 10% off, but I'm going to create one. Why don't we call it Magic?
Yeah.
For yours, and it'll be for 15% off for your listeners.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's so sweet, Maggie. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
All right. Well, thank you again. And I hope you have a great day, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.